'Cause you can't, you won't, and you don't stop. Or when you can't, you won't, and you don't stop.
In this module, we start exploring the first core area of legal content for the subject, the really hardcore law. Thus far, we've been looking at ethics and the foundations of our legal system so that we can understand where this area of law comes from and how to think about the rules. So with contract law, we're dealing with agreements between people, obviously a central element to business. And it's a very complex area of law that's developed over hundreds of years via the common law system. So because of that, we don't teach it in depth and kind of exactly legally right. It's going to be teaching you the principles of contract law so that you understand the best way to make deals in business and where the key traps might lie. It can also help us use that logic that we were talking about in Module 4. So why don't we hop in and have a look? So because contract law is such a broad topic, in fact, if we were doing it as a legal subject, you'd often do it over a full year, like it would be 2 semesters worth of a subject's topic. Because it is so large, we're actually doing it over 2 different weeks to make sure we get through the content. So what are we going to do? We're going to cover 5 questions. We're going to outline what a contract is. We're going to outline how do you form a legally enforceable contract. What might make a contract unenforceable? Okay, so we need to look at a simple, apparent contract, which is forming a contract. Then we need to make sure that that simple and apparent contract, because it's only apparent, can be enforced. Then we need to know what's in the contract, what are the terms, and then what happens if you don't follow through in the contract. Now, because it is such a big topic, we're breaking it into 2. This week, what we're going to concentrate on is what is a contract, which is a kind of introduction to what it is and what it isn't. Then we start moving on to the more testable material. How do I know I've got a contract, a simple, apparent contract? And we're going to look at enforceability, leaving the other 2 elements to the next module. In this module, we're going to, as I said, describe the essential elements of a contract. Then we need to know how we've got a simple apparent contract. And that requires us to understand whether we've got agreement, intent, and consideration, the 3 core elements of a simple apparent contract. And we're also going to be looking at enforceability in this module. So obviously, business is about making deals, contracts. Every deal in business, well, not every deal in business, but virtually all the deals in business are contracts. But what is a contract? Well, a contract is a legally enforceable agreement. Okay, so we need to be able to separate this issue of an agreement from a legally enforceable agreement. That's where contract law comes in, right? You might agree to something, and we actually need to work out whether we do have agreement. But even because we've got agreement doesn't actually mean that we've got a contract. Okay, so the contract is this legally enforceable agreement. One of the big things when we're dealing with business law is that people come in with these ideas that are kind of well-founded, like there's a reason behind them, but they're not accurate. Okay, so this really does happen a lot in contract law. So people have a view about what a contract is, and it's actually not accurate. So let's look at some of the core misconceptions about contract law. So one of the first misconceptions is that people believe you require written, signed documents. Now, look, there's an asterisk here. Why? Because some kinds of documents, like dealing in land, do need to be written in contract, but they're rare, right? You do not need a signed document. You do not require a written document to actually have a legally binding contract. Now, this idea comes from the fact that if it is written and signed, certain things flow from it, right? And really, they're about issues of evidence, right? And it's the idea that if you're going to enter a contract, right? If it's so important you're going to enter a contract, then you should be clear. And so major contracts should probably be written and signed, but often there's no legal reason that they should be. It's a question of evidence and proving what you agreed to. Many contracts are actually verbal. When you buy a cup of coffee, right? You don't sign a document or whatever, but that's a contract to buy a cup of coffee. Even you don't even need to say anything, right? If you go to get a cup of coffee from a regular place and you just give them the money and they give you the coffee, that's still a contract. So these contracts, most contracts in business, particularly in retail, are formed and performed at the same time. So they come into being and both parties actually fulfill their side of the bargain at the same time. So we agree to buy a cup of coffee and the barista or the coffee shop makes it and you pay for it at the same time, right? It's formed and performed at the same time. Some contracts, though, involve parties making a promise and having an ongoing obligation to carry it out. So, for instance, at the moment, I buy my underwear via post. Okay. I'm sure you wanted to know that. But what happens is, right, I pay them 20, they post it out to me. So we have this obligation and I actually, have to cancel, etc. Because I've made a promise that I'll pay for the undies that they sell. They're promising to sell me these undies, to send me these undies, once every couple of months. So that's an idea where we've undertaken an obligation in a simple sense. So the next misconception comes that because everything looks like a deal is a contract, but that's not true. So some deals that might look like a contract, in fact, are simply agreements, not a contract. Okay? So here's some examples. Is an agreement to sell your phone to a friend at the pub a contract? Could be, could not be, as we'll see. Is a promise by the local chicken shop to sponsor your soccer team a contract? Probably not, as we'll see. If a business advertises a product at a price, so there's a price on the shelf and you want to buy it, is there a deal? Like, must they sell it to your price under contract law? Let's be clear. And as we'll find out, probably not. So things that might look like a contract actually aren't. And we spent a lot of the course and we spend a lot of the time in this module differentiating these things. In short, the law says you have a contract, or a simple apparent contract, a legally enforceable agreement when you have three things: agreement, intent to create legal relations, and consideration. If one of those three is missing, no contract. And we're going to look at how those three interact in the next video.